Aloha. I'm Doug Herman, Senior Geographer here at the National Museum of the American Indian, and I have to talk really fast to get through all of this. I usually start with a chant, but that uses about 25% of my time. This is the Pacific Ocean. It covers about 1/3 the surface of the Earth, and it might not look like it very obviously to you, but it is in fact full of chains of islands. And by the time Westerners entered the Pacific Ocean, all of the habitable islands in the Pacific were in fact inhabited. And this is a pretty big deal when you think of how much we celebrate Columbus Day and his very short trip across the Atlantic, hitting 10,000 miles of coastline. So the question emerged, how could they possibly have done this? Speculations, incriminations, and models pursued. Starting in the early 1800s, after Europeans were really settled in there, Abraham Fornander, in particular Sir Peter Buck in New Zealand, gathered oral traditions and created this romantic tradition of great voyaging chiefs going here and there in their canoes and chants and so forth and so on. Peter Buck actually mapped it out. And in the case of Polynesians, at least, it went pretty much like this, out of Asia. That's Fiji, Samoa, Tonga there, then shooting out to the Marquesas in the central eastern Pacific, to the three corners of the Polynesian Triangle, and all the way to the Americas and back. By the time the later 1800s came along, European attitudes towards their own superiority had changed a little bit, and the idea was that if anybody could do anything that impressive, it had to be white people. Therefore, Polynesians had to be our long-lost Aryan cousins. And there was quite a bit of literature on that. And then it devolved even further. We have Thor Heyerdahl saying, first of all, no, that's entirely wrong. They came from the Americas, and it was drift voyaging with the winds and the currents. And we get the Kon-Tiki, which everybody's heard of. 1960s, Andrew Sharp saying, well, I agree with Peter Buck in terms of the direction they went, but absolutely these guys were too stupid to be able to navigate. It had to be all drift voyaging. And then in 1973, computer modeling by Levinson, Ward, and Webb proved that at most only 50% of the Pacific Islands could have been settled by drift voyaging. The rest had to be intentional navigation. Which leads us to 1975 or so, 1974, 1975, the U.S. bicentennial coming up. Anthropologist and surfer Ben Finney, Hawaiian artist and boat designer Herb Kane, Hawaiian canoe enthusiast Tommy Holmes said, hey, how about for celebrating the bicentennial here in Hawaii, we build a replica voyaging canoe and sail it to Tahiti using traditional navigation. Great idea. Problem, no Polynesians left who know how to do this. But they found this guy, Malpialug, from the island of Satawal in the Caroline Islands in Micronesia, who not only still knew how to do it, but agreed to do it for them. And along came a young Hawaiian named Nainoa Thompson. There it is, the Hōkūleʻa voyaging canoe at its launching in 1975. And in 1976, they did successfully sail it from the Hawaiian Islands 2,300 miles to Tahiti using traditional navigation. So pretty much everything we know about how they did this comes from Malpialug, though there were some scholars who did a lot of research sort of before Hōkūleʻa actually happened. And there's a lot of components to this, and as you can see, the use of stars is actually only one piece of this very complex system, but that is all we have time for today, so let's do it. Okay, there you see a great big hairy star. That's supposed to be the North Star, which is actually not that big at all. It's actually pretty puny if you've ever looked at it. And you know that you can use the two stars at the end of the Big Dipper to find it. They point more or less towards it. That's how I always find it, though I know where it is now. And in the southern hemisphere, the Southern Cross constellation, as it moves across the sky, always points to the south. So north and south, you got pretty well set. The rest of it, however, if you watch it over the course of the evening, looks like that. So you have to make sense of it somehow and have a system to do so. So this is Malpialug using the traditional teaching method of opening the mat and arranging coral blocks around it and teaching the rising and setting points of stars, or constellations as the case might be. And here it is, North Polaris at the north. And what he's teaching them is that the stars, the North Star there, is that they move across the sky from east to west. And so you need to know the rising position of the star and the setting position of the star, and these we call star paths. Now, as just to give an example, unless you're exactly on the equator, the stars don't move directly straight up and down. So this is at the latitude of the Hawaiian Islands. We have Vega just coming up over the horizon, and we see that over the lapse of time, it is in fact moving at an angle. So pretty soon, by about that point, if you're using Vega, you're off course. So at this point, you need to know the next star that comes up in that point, and then the next star that comes up in that point, because the stars rise 4 minutes later every night. So you have to know the entire sphere of the heavens, and Maupialeg was said to know the paths of over 160 stars. So this is just our pretty picture showing that if you're out at sea, unless you're on the equator, they are rising and setting at angles. Now, you don't need to use the star right in front of you to navigate. If it's cloudy in front of you, you can use the star over there. You just keep it in that position, or the star over there. So it's not as complicated as it needs to be. Now, you can also tell a latitude using the height of the stars. This is using Polaris. And you actually just stretch out your hand, and this shape out here, put your pinky on the horizon, that's about a 20-degree angle. And they have all these other ways. If you saw Moana, you saw her always going like this. This is to figure out your latitude using the declination of the North Star or the Southern Cross. You can also use star pairs. So in this case, when Rigel and Aldebaran hit the horizon at exactly the same time, you know you are at the latitude of Tahiti. And then you just need to sail downwind, assuming that you know that you're upwind of Tahiti. This is a map showing the named sea routes in the area of Ulithi Atoll in western Micronesia. And here we have the major named sea routes of the former Yap Empire. So basically, if you are a navigator, you need to know the names of these routes and all of the information that goes with them. The star paths, the drift information, the currents, and so forth, the sea marks, etc. There's a lot of lore involved. Finally, I just want to point out this fascinating, I love this. This is from the Micronesian system of navigation. Here we are traveling from the island of departure to the destination, and we're marking off stages of the journey using a reference island and what stars or constellations rise or set over that reference island. The secret? You can't see the reference island. So that's where this gets really interesting. So another time, come to my 45-minute talk on this. So, let's see, this is not moving again, so we'll try that. Hello. Oop. And that's not what I wanted to do. You do it. Thank you. Next one. Yep. That's the last slide. And of course, once the sun comes up, you can't see the stars at all. So that's where all the rest of this system comes into play with swells and currents and so forth and so on. Thank you.